So one of the questions I get asked quite often, especially from girls in that dating stage of life, is what are some things that Patrick and I did while we were dating that we are thankful that we did, and then what advice would we have for couples who are dating? And while I'm quick to say that we didn't do everything perfectly, and there are definitely things that I would do differently if I were to do it over again, there are a lot of things that I'm really grateful Patrick and I did while we were dating that made both dating easier on our purity, and then also made our marriage easier when it came along. So the first thing that we did that we always advise people, and that we're really thankful that we did, was we always dated in public. We never were alone while we were dating. And this was something that was very inconvenient, and some people thought was a bit strange and probably a bit extreme. But at the same time, it was really our saving grace when it came to keeping our purity and not going too far. Even though I do think we did more than we should have, this is what really helped keep us from not going the full way. Because obviously, if you're with other people, you're not going to go as far as you would if you weren't with other people, if you were alone. So what this looked like was we never went over each other's houses unless there were other people there, which there usually weren't. It was very inconvenient for us. We were both in a town where neither of our parents were at the time, so we both lived in places well, I lived with an older lady, but my husband lived in a place with just himself, so I pretty much never went over his house. And so it meant we went out a lot, and that can get expensive, so we actually made it kind of like a game to make it a bit fun. We set a limit on how much money we would usually spend when we went out, except for special occasions, and we would make it a goal to find these places that were really cheap to go eat. Also, I'd pack a lot of picnic lunches, I'd pack sandwiches, and we'd have our lunches together. We'd meet each other for lunch, and so it actually made it really fun, and it also made it really fun when we got married, because it meant that that was the first time we were alone, and it made that really fun and novel. So even things like being in the house together was just really fun, because we could do all the things that we couldn't do before. We didn't have to be out all the time. Along those lines, you're never going to regret holding back. You probably will regret things that you didn't hold back more than things that you did hold back. And I regret the things that I didn't hold back, and I wish I'd held back more. So once you're married, you can do whatever you want, and you're not going to regret having held back before, because when you get married, there are no boundaries, pretty much. So I always advise dating couples to hold back as much as you can until you're married. I know a lot of people in the purity movement are holding back their kisses until they get married, and that's something that I wish I had done. And I think that's something that's it's a really good principle. Of course, it can't be bound. There's nowhere in the Bible that says thou shalt not kiss while you're dating, but I think it's a good principle, because it is something which very quickly leads to sexual things. So that's along those lines. Another thing that I'm really grateful that we did was we did our research. So where we were, there wasn't really anyone in the church who was a good marital counselor. So we decided to become our own marital counselors, and we read a lot of books on marriage and then discussed them together. So we read them separately, and then when we got together for dinners and lunches and such, we would discuss what we had read and how we felt it applied to us, and how we thought it would apply to our marriage in the future. Of course, we didn't know everything about how it would apply to our marriage, but later it was very helpful for our marriage when we got married. So some of our favorites, probably the top two favorites, were His Needs, Her Needs, and The 5 Love Languages. So His Needs, Her Needs is by William F. Harley, and I found that really good for understanding my husband and his needs. I didn't find I related to it as much as he related to his needs, her needs. So that really, and it was good from the perspective that it helped to see that marriage is all about meeting someone's needs, and if you're not meeting their needs, then there's going to be problems. Yeah, so His Needs, Her Needs was really good. And then The Five Love Languages, which is quite a popular book by Gary Chapman. And I found I related to that more. I felt like my needs were better expressed through the Five Love Languages book. Another one that's really good is The Song of Solomon, the Book of Romance, which is by Tommy Nelson. That's a really good book about God's book of romance. And then also You're Singing My Song, which is one that we read after we were married. We would read it every night and discuss what we had read and how that applied to us and how we were feeling about our needs and how we could better our marriage. And it was a really nice way to begin our marriage with that reading of that book. One thing that's really good about reading books to help your relationship is that when you're having a problem, you don't have to use your language. You can use the language of the book, and it's the language that you have in common because you've both read it. So you can say, you know how the book says that? Well, that's how I'm feeling. And it's not so much coming from you. It's more like we're applying the book to our lives rather than we're accusing each other. So that's something that was really helpful, and it helped us to have a common language. Very often when you try and communicate with someone else, you're coming at it from a different perspective, and sometimes you have a different definition for the words that you're using, or you don't quite know how to express exactly how you're feeling. That's how books help, because they really encapsulate ideas, and you can then express them in a way that you both understand if you've both read the book. So become your own counselors in a way. If there is a premarital counselor where you are that's good, then great, go ahead and do that. But also become your own premarital counselor as well. Do your research, and it will really help once you're married. Another thing that really helped for us was we created a culture of communication. So the books really helped with that, for one, and then we just made sure that we communicated about everything, our struggles, our expectations, things that we wanted to happen in our marriages, and that happened, and that helped for later when we were married. We already had that culture of communication, and so we very easily slipped into that, and there's always been no secrets between us, which has been really good. Along those lines, when you're dating, probably the only thing you have to be really careful about is not talking about sex so much. I think that you should be able to talk about it in a certain degree, but then you don't want to be talking about it in an explicit way, obviously, because that's saved for marriage. So, but pretty much everything else we talked about. And then along those lines, while you're creating a culture of communication, clearly define your expectations for what you want for your marriage and what you want your role to be. If you have your roles, if you have your expectations for each other, and then also what you want your role to be defined before you are married, then it's going to stop a lot of problems from happening. Obviously, there will always be surprises. There will be things that come up that you didn't anticipate, problems, stresses, things like this. But the more that you can anticipate those problems, the more that you can talk about hypothetically what you would do in those situations, what you would want done, then the less problems you have. For example, we would always, when we were out for dinner and things, we would see couples and the way they dealt with their children, and we would not judge the parents, but just look at what the child was doing and say, what would we do in that situation? What do you think would be the best way to handle this? And we would discuss it, and we would come to a mutual agreement as to what we thought would be the best course of action. And those kind of things really helped along the way, and it kind of stops those surprises from happening for when the things come along and then you're like, oh, hang on, I didn't realize you believed that, and then it causes tension. So always discussing things like that, and that really helped us when we were married. Something we did it was something we did when we were dating. So those are some things that have helped us. If there are any books or any tips you have that helped you when you were dating, prepare for your marriage, or helped you keep your purity while you were dating, then please leave a comment below the video. I'd really like to hear from you, and if you have any questions too, you can message me or leave a question in the comments. So thank you so much for listening. My name is Chantal, and I blog at happyhealthyholyhome.com, and I'd love to see you over there. Thank you very much. Have a great day.